Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Kevin Igo, Managing Director of Professional Fee Protection. I'm pleased to welcome you all here today to listen to our webinar on ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. I'm delighted to be joined today by Fiona McRoberts from HMRC, who is I believe you're the Assistant Director of ADR. Is that right, Fiona?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, excellent, good, thanks for that. Right, so Fiona, perhaps you'd like to say hello to our listeners and give them a little bit about your background, please.
Certainly, and thank you very much, Kevin, for having me here today. Hi, everybody, lovely to virtually meet you all. We did try to put the camera on earlier, but it wasn't working, so unfortunately you're just getting the screen now, so you are. But I'm sure everybody's been on a lot of calls like that in the last year or two. A little bit of background about me. I'm an accredited mediator and an accredited negotiator with CEDAR, which is the Centre for Effective Dispute Resolution. And I completed my initial mediation training as part of a joint venture between HMRC and the accountancy profession, and that was way back in 2012, which more years ago than I care to remember. So I undertook a number of mediations as an adjunct to my day job for a number of years, and then I joined the ADR team in 2016 as a complex mediator, and I took on the role of leading the team, or assistant director, as Kevin has said, in 2021. And prior to doing mediation, I worked in a number of areas, including as a technical advisor and as a compliance caseworker, or in old money as an inspector, which I'm sure most of you maybe recognize that term a little bit better. And I did both IT and CT inquiries. And Kevin has very kindly asked me to come here today and discuss ADR within HMRC. You can see on the screen sort of the main areas we're going to look at: the causes of disputes, when ADR is the best choice, the current process and parameters, the future, and questions and answers. I'm happy, I think Kevin's going to be managing the Q&A side.
Yes,
or the questions.
Yes. So as ever, if anybody has any questions, please give them throughout. Fiona has said she likes the trickier questions if she can get them, so feel free to ask them, and the more challenging questions. We will be also sending around a set of the slides afterwards for everybody. So without further ado, over to you, Fiona.
Absolutely, right. Thank you very much, Kevin. And as I say, we'll try and deal with the questions as we go. And if there's anything that I can't answer, I will try and get back to you afterwards. The other thing is, I'm sure there's a bit of this, a lot of people here who've been involved in ADR at all will know, but I'm going to be going over a few of the main things about ADR now. Let's hopefully see if I can get this to work. Slideshow to work. Right, so what is ADR in HMRC? Alternative dispute resolution, as I understand it, the phrase arose as an alternative to the tribunal, but I know there's a lot of clever people out there probably be able to correct me in that, but that's, as I understand, where that alternative phrase arose from. But within HMRC, it's a flexible process in which an impartial HMRC mediator actively assists parties in working towards an agreement of a dispute. And the key point here is that the parties have the ultimate control of any decisions taken in reaching that agreement. So you've accredited mediators from the Alternative Dispute Resolution team work with HMRC officers, the customer, and any of their representatives to help resolve the differences without the time and expense of litigating the dispute before the tax tribunal. But of course, it doesn't diminish the opportunity to go to the tax tribunal if that's what people want. It is an alternative. It is supported by tribunal rules, and that's been made very clear in the last year or two by one or two of the practice statements. But it does need a collaborative approach between all parties. As I'm sure you're all aware, current waiting times for the tax tribunal are not short, and they're in the region at the moment of 72 weeks and upwards. So it's always helpful if we can resolve things in any sort of different way. But what causes disputes? You can read them all there. Complexity of the issues, differing views of the law, which of course I think feeds into complexity, and we all have that. Changes in policy, practical application problems, expectation versus practice, and differing views of the facts. And I think that last one is probably one of the big ones that we face an awful lot of the time, differing views of the facts. But what are our possible solutions? You could negotiate with the case team. That's always an opportunity and always an option. You can go to litigation if you're post-decision, or you can look at ADR, which encompasses a range of dispute resolution techniques, including mediation, facilitated discussions, email exchanges, and telephone exchanges. And I think I want to sort of be very clear here that ADR involves a full range of dispute resolution techniques. It's not just mediation. Sometimes there are other slightly lighter touch things which actually will work very, very well for a particular dispute or discussion. So it's worth bearing in mind that there's lots of different ways we can look at this. But what inhibits effective dispute resolution? Well, obviously, ADR and HMRC differs from commercial disputes because HMRC works within certain parameters. They have to work within the law. They have to look at fairness and consistency towards all taxpayers, and obviously that means the precedent effect. And they also have a number of regulations and statutory limitations that they have to work with. But the other things you have, there's a lack of understanding of the facts and the arguments. There can be a lack of trust, assumptions made without discussion of the respective positions. And quite often, I'm sure you've all found this with your clients, that there's been an ongoing interaction with HMRC and nobody's actually ever spoken to either party, so they haven't. It's always been via correspondence. Sometimes that's very good, but sometimes correspondence can be misunderstood and misread, so it can, and that can breed that lack of trust. There can be a lack of focus and an unrealistic view of the possible outcomes of any dispute. Sometimes people can be a little adversarial, and that does not necessarily help resolve a dispute. Maybe there's no real incentive to settle. Maybe it's just worth fighting to the end to see where you get to. And that probably ties into the last one, a lack of a constructive resolution-focused mindset. So all of those things come together. But what is the actual essence of ADR? ADR meetings are conducted expressly on equal terms, recognizing the dispute as a shared issue, which the parties have a shared interest in resolving. A third party is brought in with the agreement of both parties to facilitate a bilateral agreement. And I think the last one, if I recall correctly, came from CEDAR. The perspective of the parties that this is not solvable is the very definition of a dispute. I think that's one thing we always have to remember when somebody wants to come into ADR and say there's just no way forward. There actually quite often is. But when can you use ADR? Well, I think communications have broken down, probably one of the key things. And I'm always loving quotes, so I am. And one of the best in this comes from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. An unfortunate truism, I think, in today's society. But you'll see that list of inhibitors to effective dispute resolution are also a lot of the times that you can use ADR. That lack of clear understanding, lack of clarity, a lack of trust, an unrealistic view of the outcomes, but if you have a desire for an equitable, efficient, cost-effective outcome, that quite often is when ADR can really help. And when is it appropriate? So whenever HMRC and a customer are locked in a dispute and there's no clear exit point, or when disputes seem destined for the tribunal, it seems sensible for both sides in the dispute to consider ADR. In most cases, coming into the ADR process, the customer will already have appealed against a formal HMRC decision on the issue. But mediation can also be used effectively before matters have reached that stage. If there's a lack of collaborative working, or if working relationships have broken down, the introduction of a mediator can help take the heat out of the situation and progress things. Each party talking to an impartial mediator who is focused on brokering a resolution. Cases may also be suitable for mediation where both sides are working collaboratively, but they find they're not really making any progress. For example, it may be proving difficult to pin down the essential points of disagreement, or there may be uncertainty about the other party's underlying position. And unfortunately, quite often happens, sometimes there's uncertainty about what the important facts actually are. And in some long-running cases, the customer will be reluctant to provide further information in addition to earlier submissions of documents because they've lost faith in the inquiry process. They see no end in sight to HMRC's requests for information, and a mediator can help the parties decide and agree what facts are relevant and also what further facts need to be disclosed so that a decision can be made. And I've put down there at the bottom, we do co-mediations. One thing that we have, we always have an HMRC mediator there, but I know a number of customers and clients want one of their own mediators there. So we do co-mediations along with a representative from the customer party if that's what somebody would like or want.
Okay, we have a couple of questions just come in concerning the role of the mediator. Hirsch has said that they sat through a mediation and they didn't feel that the ADR member was neutral. Can you just clarify what their role is, please?
Sure. Right. And I will be covering this a little more later on, but just in brief, the mediators there sit impartially to try and help the two parties to discuss the issues. They will challenge. They will maybe ask some difficult questions sometimes to both parties. And I think certainly, particularly when you go into a private room, it can appear that one party might feel that they're getting a fair bit of questioning. I can assure you that the other party's getting the same sort of questioning, so they are. It's a matter of testing the arguments, testing the facts, testing everything to make sure both parties are very clear in their position and very clear in their understanding of the dispute. Your mediator does sit impartially in the middle, and it has not, we are completely separate team to anybody else in HMRC. We don't work on the cases. We don't work alongside the people who are actually the compliance case officers. So I would reassure you that everybody works in the mediation team is fully impartial, and all they do is sit in the middle and try and help the two parties come together to share the relevant information and to reach a resolution if that's possible.
Okay, thank you. One more before we move on from Peter. How do we ensure that the HMRC representative come along is prepared to negotiate? I think the gist here is that he sat through a meeting where the officer came along and just they obviously didn't want to engage.
Okay, I understand the issue, and of course, I think we see that on occasion. We do our best. We discuss that with both sides. We try to manage all the expectations. I think one of the things to possibly remember here, and again, I don't know, obviously I'm talking in general, is that the HMRC officer may not have any room for manoeuvre, and that should be made clear in advance of any mediation. And I think I'm just about to say that to discuss concerns and expectations with the mediator. Sometimes if it's a very clear policy issue, a very clear legal issue, and everything is already being considered and looked at, they can't, the HMRC officer will not be in a position to come to a negotiated, or I think an old money horse trade was the term used, but they have to make a decision in line with the LSS that is in line with the law. But we do an awful lot of outreach. We do an awful lot of talking to people to try and ensure that everybody comes with an open mind and with the expectation of actually discussing the issues and making sure everybody, at the very least, if they can't move on the issue, they can make sure that both parties fully understand the issue.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, you mentioned about co-mediation.
Yeah.
Who decides whether a co-mediator is to be used, and presumably the client pays for it?
Yes, it's up to the client to pay for it. On my apologies for that, but yes, it is, because a mediator is provided to them for no charge by HMRC. It's up to them if they wish to engage a co-mediator. It's basically a matter of discussing that with the HMRC mediator, and that will be for the customer, if they wish to do that, to put that forward to the HMRC mediator.
Okay, thanks so much.
We do, sorry, just to add to that, Ken, we do ask any co-mediator to sign up just to a set of terms and conditions or protocols, which is nothing very much more than our normal terms and conditions of HMRC of ADR, but it's just to make sure everybody understands where they're at, and we're very clear on that. but it's a full co-mediation. I've been involved in many of them where we work. Myself and another co-mediator will work between the two rooms, as it were, both working together and both in that neutral, impartial position.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm lost my place. What makes for a successful mediation? Before the mediation, just I think a little bit of what Kevin was talking about there, to discuss clearly any concerns and expectations with the mediator, to fully consider any further documentation or evidence which may be useful to establish in the tax position, and either request this or forward in advance of the mediation meeting, and to set out a clear and logical opening statement. Now, opening statements are often exchanged simultaneously about a week in advance of any ADR meeting, but the timing of exchange will be up to each individual mediator, because I know this has come up once or twice. So it might not be a week, it might be a little more, it might be a little less, but that's a sort of a general principle. And then during the meeting, each party needs to be well prepared. They need to have a thorough understanding of the facts, the technical issues, and the tax position. They need to be prepared to discuss all the points raised and consider fresh information and facts and apply the technical position to those facts. An awareness of the bigger picture. All settlements must be LSS compliant, and I will come on to the LSS, the litigation and settlement strategy, sorry, in a little while, just to clarify that a little bit more. There has to be an understanding that ADR may not resolve the issue fully, but it may clarify the point or points under dispute. It may clearly set out any further information or evidence required to substantiate the tax position, and it may allow full and frank discussion of the particular case and its own particular facts. So it can all be summed up by one word: it's participation, which I think goes back to the question that somebody asked a minute ago. I certainly expect all parties to fully participate with the aim of resolving a dispute. That's where we're looking to get to. And after the mediation meeting, forward any further information or computations or analysis within an agreed timetable set out by the mediator, to keep the mediator informed if deadlines aren't going to be met and to set new ones, and to finalise matters as efficiently as possible to enable all parties to progress. It all sounds very simple when I put it like that, but that's what we try to aim for. But the litigation and settlement strategy, I did say I would comment on this, and there is new guidance going out on this in the very near future. I don't think it has been published just yet, but there is new guidance on this. So the LSS, the litigation and settlement strategy, was drafted quite some number of years ago, and it encourages HMRC staff to minimise the scope for disputes and seek non-confrontational solutions, to resolve tax disputes consistently with HMRC's considered view of the law, subject to that, to handle and resolve disputes cost effectively based on the wider impact or value of cases across the tax system and across HMRC's customer base, to ensure that revenue flows potentially involved make any dispute worthwhile, to settle for the full amount that HMRC believes the tribunal or courts would determine or otherwise litigate. In all or nothing cases, not split the difference. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I said we can't negotiate or horse trade on things. It has to be the correct view of the law. And in weak cases, concede rather than pursue. So,
okay, we've got one question from Philip before we go on about, is the normal ADR process free?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But subject to obviously any cost your client may incur, but external to HMRC, but we provide the mediator, we provide everything. So yes, it is essentially. Are all disputes suitable for ADR? Mediation will only be used in cases where there is a potential benefit right from the start. It should not be used if there's no realistic prospect of any progress, and any further discussion will just delay matters. If the customer doesn't want mediation, then it won't happen. In some cases, HMRC may wish to have a test case before the tribunal to get a ruling on a disputed issue that is occurring in a number of similar cases. So mediation would not be suitable in those situations, even if the customer is keen to try it. It may not be useful where there is significant doubt about the veracity or strength of the evidence provided and HMRC wish to test it by cross-examination at tribunal. And there are also specific areas of tax where HMRC currently do not offer ADR. These include cases being dealt with as a criminal matter, debt management issues, default surcharge appeals, late filing appeals, tax credit and PAYE coding issues. And ADR cannot be given in cases where a decision has been made by HMRC and there's no appeal in place. So if it's post-decision and there's no appeal in place, ADR cannot be offered because we have no ability to change the position unless there's an open appeal. Obviously, if it's a pre-decision, that doesn't apply. That's a different matter, so it is. And then if a formal HMRC review of a decision is underway at the customer's request, ADR won't be offered at the same time, but once that review decision has been made, then the customer can make an application for ADR as well as appeal to the tribunal. So how does that actually work? And again, we're trying to try and get into these. The mediator will help everyone drill down into the issues in dispute to establish areas of agreement and identify any areas of disputed fact where compromise may be appropriate. Negotiation does not mean compromising on an issue just to get an agreement. I just have to clarify that. And HMRC will not settle an issue just to avoid costs where they believe tax is properly due and payable. Tax disputes must in all cases be resolved in accordance with the law. And that comes back to the litigation and settlement strategy. Where there's more than one dispute between a customer and HMRC, each dispute must be considered and resolved on its own merits, not as part of any overall package deal. In most cases, resolution by agreement is likely to offer the most effective and efficient outcome. However, again, HMRC will not compromise in its view of the law to secure agreement. And in that context, there will be cases where litigation offers the most effective and efficient means of resolution. Where there's a range of possible figures for tax due, HMRC will not settle by agreement for an amount which is less than it would reasonably expect to obtain from litigation. I appreciate you all know all of that anyway. Those are all fairly normal things. So we've kind of gone what makes a good ADR and how does it work, but what does a typical mediation look like? What is the actual process? We have opening presentations, both parties come in. Normally the taxpayer presents their opening statement or opening arguments first, the taxpayer or their representative. It'll then be up to the mediator whether they keep everybody together for a bit of a chat or whether they separate everybody out into private meetings immediately. That's a decision taken on the day, depending on how things are and what the issues in dispute are. If it's useful, parties will be brought back together for further joint sessions. And of course, at the end, hopefully there will be a written record of outcome agreement where appropriate, setting out either full resolution or the next steps, depending on what the issues are and what the disputes have been. As I'm sure most of you know now, mediations are normally held via video, and that enables us to provide the most effective, efficient service to the greatest number of customers within the resources we have available to us. And I'm pausing briefly because I can imagine there might be a question or two, but maybe not.
Yes, yes. I think you've had coming on to this. Philip's asked, he's reached an impasse with HMRC over tax matter. How does he instigate ADR?
There is an application form online on our website, the gov.uk website. There should be an online application form. If you have any difficulty finding that, I think my email's at the end of this presentation, and just drop me a line and I'll make sure you can get a link to that.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned about disputes or this system being used where there's a potential benefit. Who determines if there's a potential benefit?
That will be the mediator in discussion with both parties. So the mediator will talk to all stakeholders, which obviously customer side, customer representatives, and any of the HMRC stakeholders, where there is a disagreement about a case coming into ADR. For example, it's deemed that perhaps let's say one party, and obviously if the customer has applied for ADR, it's less likely to be them, or very unlikely to be them. But if there is some reason that it is deemed that a case is not suitable for ADR, it's put up to either our standard panel or our complex panel, sorry, losing the ability to speak now, our standard or complex panel for review, and they will make a decision based on all the information from both parties. So
okay,
it's a report that we put up.
Wesley's asked, is ADR available for R&D tax credit claims?
It can be. It certainly has been. If there is an R&D case, I would certainly happy to discuss it with you in advance if you want to ring me afterwards. But I would suggest that you put in an application and it will be considered in the normal way.
Okay, what sort of percentage of applications are accepted?
Ooh, now hit me on my stats now. Right. She says the biggest reason, and I'm not avoiding your question here, Kevin. So I'm genuinely not. The biggest reason cases are not accepted is because there isn't a valid appeal at tribunal and they're post decision. So that's the only reason. To give you an actual percentage of cases that are rejected for other reasons, I don't have that off the top of my head, but I know it's not very many. We do accept a large number of cases, but if it's post decision and there's not a live appeal, we cannot accept it. So I can look up those stats and find them for you, but I just don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay. Is ADR resolution binding on both parties?
It is. It is binding if you're settling an appeal or a dispute like that. It is binding, yes.
I think the comment there is, I think we've had a couple of cases where they've it's been decided afterwards that the HMRC were wrong in law to agree to a settlement, so they've been able to go back on it, haven't they?
Yeah, if they can, you cannot bind HMRC to something that is incorrect in law.
Okay, we've had a number of comments on the video situation.
Yeah.
I think generally people feel that the results haven't been perhaps as good for the client, the customer, in video meetings as they are face to face. So I'll give you a flavour of the question. What's been the impact of achieving finality in ADR cases with the move away from face to face meetings?
Okay. Our results have actually remained reasonably consistent, so they have. Obviously, the number of applications and the number of mediations dropped away in 2020. I'm going to get my years mixed up. Was in 2020 the first year of COVID? Yeah. So, but they have started. The number of applications and the number of mediations have picked up. The resolution rate has remained consistently the same, and any of you who read the Tax Assurance Commissioner's report will see that. So we haven't had a drop off in that. We do appreciate that sometimes people do prefer face to face, but as I sort of said, and you can see there, we have to do our best within the resources we have available to us to try and help the greatest number of customers.
Okay, so do clients have the option to request face to face?
Our normal and our default is that cases are by video, but if there is a particular reason for a face-to-face, I'm not saying it won't be considered, but most of our cases and our default is that it is video.
Okay, so so I've got a number of questions coming on this. What sort of reasons would be acceptable for a mediator to say, yes, we'll accept face-to-face?
On that, it's on a case-by-case basis. So I would just, if that is the particular situation you have, I would say you're best to get in touch, and we can consider what the particular circumstances of your case are.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right. Thank you. I'll if there's anything more on that, just keep sending the questions. I'll keep moving forward at this stage. So I think somebody has mentioned the role of the mediator, so I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail here. Obviously, if you've got two parties, they can get into an entrenched position, and that can produce an intractable dispute. interests and needs may not be irreconcilable, however, and the mediator can help unlock that deadlock. Again, I've mentioned this, they can challenge the strengths and the weaknesses of each party's case. They can encourage the parties to look forward and not back. As they say, and I suppose it's a little trite, we cannot change the past, but we can impact the future by how we behave in the present. So we can always, it's always best to try and put what's behind us and move forward. But the mediator can be that catalyst for re-engaging discussion, getting to the heart of the real issues in dispute and unlocking them, exploring the facts and the evidence. They can help the parties hold up a mirror and actually say, are you sure about what you're saying here? Are you sure about your arguments? They can help develop a level of trust. You've got that opportunity to have good, insightful conversation. You can widen the range of possible solutions greater than traditional negotiation. At best, you might get a settlement. In fact, you hopefully will get a settlement, but at worst, you'll be better prepared for litigation or for the next stages of your compliance intervention. It's a matter of looking for the positives, not just focusing on the negatives. And I think one of the key things here is the matter actually in dispute, or is it just not yet been agreed? And I think ADR is very good at fleshing out those sort of things. The other thing it can do is help improve future behaviour and relationships for both parties. So the concluding stage of a mediation, each settlement should meet the following criteria, and I appreciate that they won't always do this. It should satisfy the parties. It deals with all the issues in dispute, unless the parties agree to isolate some issues to be dealt with in another forum. It's workable, and it minimises the possibility for future disputes. That's what we aim for.
Okay, we've got one question here on the ADR. What should they do if nothing's been heard 3 months after an ADR meeting, where HMRC have promised to let us have their decision shortly?
Have they been in touch with the mediator again to find out what's going on?
I don't know. That's just, yeah.
Sorry, right. My apologies. Sorry, I shouldn't ask you that question. That would be the first thing, is get in touch with the mediator and find out what's going on. And if that's not getting you anywhere, anybody can come direct to me or to the ADR mailbox, which again should be, I think, on our website. So it should, and any queries will be answered. But my first protocol would be, if it's still within the mediation process, ask the mediator what's going on. And if it's, if the mediation process has been concluded, ask the HMRC team. And again, if you're not getting anywhere, come back to the mediation team and ask us, and we will do our best to see what's happening.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem, no problem. I think this is probably one of the things that can be quite difficult, and we do try to explain in advance, but it doesn't always, it isn't always clear. Concluding in a mediation and the unavoidable delays. HMRC has to be transparent about how it concludes and settles cases. So some cases need to go to various governance boards, depending on the complexity or the level of those cases. There may be further technical or policy advice required. There may be further information that needs to be reviewed, as in perhaps the case that Kevin, you've just mentioned there. Somebody was waiting for a response for a number of months. And there may be further documentation which needs to be obtained. It is hoped that the mediator will endeavour to manage all of those by way of a timetable within the record of outcome or an agreement at the conclusion of the meeting. But again, if you have any issues on any of that, if you either, as I say, come back to myself or come back through the ADR mailbox. We do also have a telephone number on the gov.uk site, which for those who are, I think the correct term now is less digitally able. So you can leave a message and somebody will call you back as well. Kevin, if I haven't given those to you, I'll give them to you, and you can forward those to all your members if that would make life easier.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to say, despite all the questions coming in, I'm going to say it does work. Both parties control the outcome. All discussions and meetings are held without prejudice. The facilitator can add a fresh dynamic. No loss of customer statutory rights to appeal or review. If litigation is unavoidable, ADR can help both parties prepare. It can clarify the issues, it can narrow the issues, and it can determine relevant facts and check the understanding of facts. And I just have to make a slight correction. Somebody was supposed to take without prejudice out of there, because they're not all without prejudice. That is the only discussions and meetings that are within the legal parameters of without prejudice are without prejudice. So I will correct those slides before you send them out, Kevin, please.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. That should have been taken out. So then we get to the bit, some people love stats. I'm not the biggest lover of them, but I will stand over these ones at the moment. Those are our current level of stats, which probably answer a few of the queries that have come in. Resolution rate there of 90%, and the same for most cases resolved within 120 days. And we're close to 8,000 applications since we started ADR in HMRC. So where has ADR added value to tax disputes? Again, you'll have the opportunity to read these afterwards. Helping the vulnerable, avoiding unnecessary litigation, and resolving ministerial complaints. Those are just 3 different examples. What customers say, I think the key things you have here is the smooth process. One reason, coming down in the bottom line there, that we like to, one of the reasons we use an HMRC mediator is because of their knowledge of HMRC's policy and understanding of the litigation settlement strategy, the parameters of the business. That means that they're able to move the process on very effectively and efficiently, and it is actually extremely helpful. But what are our next steps? As always, again, I think this has been highlighted already today, ADR awareness, trying to raise our awareness throughout the full network in HMRC. We do an awful lot of talks, both internally and a number externally as well, but an awful lot internally. We do workshops, we do discussions to try and develop that pointed network. Ongoing consideration of areas which have traditionally been seen as unsuitable for ADR. We're always looking at these. We're always looking at that list about a scope to see if there's areas that we could do more and help more in. And yeah, and I've dealt with the last one. And evolving and improving. I appreciate that not everybody sees it as an improvement, but the use of technology, we've led on that. We've worked an awful lot with our compliance colleagues on AH cases to promote targeted use of mediation to reduce numbers on hand. And we're always trying to refine our processes to increase the quality of service. So we're always working to further embed ADR to support the tax system and to increase engagement across the board with ADR. We also collaborate with our external partners, like Kevin, and again, I thank you for inviting me today to try and raise as much awareness as possible. We try, if a dispute is unsuitable for ADR, we try to refer people to the appropriate person and provide clear explanations for that. And we're always looking to make our guidance more accessible. And we've done an awful lot of rewriting of the ADR guidance in recent times, and that has been published, and hopefully will make life more convenient or easier for everybody else.
You mentioned there, so if I could just drop that bit about you open ourselves to proper levels of scrutiny, that leads us on to a question we've had from Phil about are the mediators subject to ongoing assessment to ensure they uphold the values of the ADR process?
All mediators undertake, every case is reviewed very regularly as it's going through. So it's reviewed at, I'm trying to remember, yes, 6-week, 12-week, and then every 4 weeks after that, every case will be reviewed and discussed with with the mediator individually to see what's happening with it, and if there's any reasons it's not moving forward, or why it's progressing, on how it's progressing, and so on. So there's internal scrutiny across the board from that point of view. All our mediators, we provide core professional development every year for them, and I don't just say that lightly. I try normally to get external bodies in to give us to do training for the team in all sorts of different mediation techniques and qualities, values, all of those sorts of things. The last ones we had in was a lot of crisis negotiation and things like that. So there's always that ongoing CPD for the team and ongoing scrutiny of cases. So there should be a good level of governance and transparency in what's going on.
Thanks. How many mediators are there?
There are.
And are there plans to increase?
At this stage, there are approximately 30. We are looking to expand our offer, but of course we are, as I'm sure you're all aware, within the confines of resourcing at this current time, which I'm sure is head across government and in all sorts of departments. So we are looking to increase our offer and increase where we can, but we are of course subject to the current resourcing restrictions.
Okay, thank you. What's a typical timescale for ADR from submitting an application to attending mediation and getting a resolution?
Okay, submitting an application, we aim to respond to any application within 30, as in with either an acceptance or rejection within 30 days. That of course can be subject to getting hold of stakeholders, or if cases have to go to a panel, that may increase that, but we do try to respond to your initial application within 30 days. With a decision, sorry, within 30 days, not just getting in touch within 30 days, but actually with a decision within 30 days. Within 120 days after that, we aim to have all our ADRs concluded. That depends on two things, is if there's going to be a full mediation meeting, there's availability of parties, but it's also both parties being ready to go to mediation. And we find that there are obviously cases come into mediation where the parties are not actually ready to come to a mediation meeting, but that is our aim, is to try and have them completed within 120 days of acceptance.
Okay, thank you. Where are the mediators recruited from across HMRC? What experience do they have in disputes that they're trying to resolve?
They are recruited, sorry, I was losing that word. They're recruited from anywhere across HMRC, subject to application. Obviously, there are, like any normal application system, there are essential criteria, desired criteria, and then it's going to be subject to what qualities and competencies they have that would bring them into the team. However, we provide full training for every mediator that comes into the team. All of our mediators are put through a fully accredited tax dispute mediation course.
Okay, thank you. Lucy makes a comment, since hi Fiona, my experience of ADR has been very positive. One comment I would make regarding the virtual forum, however, is that the sharing of documents is clunky, as we were advised we couldn't share screens, so had to keep emailing docs across. Is this being addressed?
It is, and it has been addressed, and you should be able to share screens now. So you should, as long as everybody accepts the potential risks of sharing screens, then yes, you can share screens now. So that was one of the security risks at this, one of the security implications at the start, but we have that ironed out now.
Great stuff. Okay, thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you very much. So I think, yeah, so we talked about educating people, continuous improvement. We're looking to promote ourselves better to I know to all agents, but including the smaller agents who maybe don't have as much access to sometimes these forums, and to the general public, and by that I mean the unrepresented taxpayers who don't have that opportunity to maybe see and where we're at with a lot of these things. As I say, we provide ongoing CPD to all our mediators, and we are looking at feedback all the time. I think the feedback form, I know you get that sent out after a mediation. We are looking at updating that as well, so we are to make sure it's giving everybody what we need to improve ourselves on an ongoing basis. So I think what can we achieve? Well, what we're looking to achieve is a flexible approach to dispute resolution that is constantly evolving and responsive to the challenges and requirements of the future. And that's whether whether the dispute is a large one or a small one. So in conclusion, ADR is a flexible process that gives the customer and HMRC an opportunity to resolve their dispute without the costs and uncertainty involved in a formal tribunal hearing. They can use the services of a trained mediator, and they can take advantage of discussions to see if there's any possibility of a negotiated settlement. The parties in dispute have ultimate control of the decision to settle and can work on creating their own negotiated agreement rather than leaving the decision to a tribunal judge, which we all know how that can go. But I'm going to give one final word, and that final word goes to, in my humble opinion, one of the greatest mediators and negotiators of our time. It always seems impossible until it is done, Mr. Nelson Mandela. And thank you very, very much for listening. And if there's any more questions, happy to hear them.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question, briefly, can you summarise for someone who, if they've said, if there's a valid reason for winning at tribunal, why do we need ADR?
Sorry, do you mean a valid reason for either party, or?
Yes, to win at tribunal.
That's true. If a case is correct to litigation, then it should go to litigation. Now, if one party is, shall I say, not wishing to relinquish their position, sometimes ADR can set that position, set each party's position out clearly, so it makes it more clear for a party that they should withdraw from that case. That might be a situation. So that's I think when I talked about clarifying issues, that's where that can be very useful. It sets things out, it makes things clear as to the strength or weakness of either party's position. But if it is very much, if all the information is there, it's very binary and it's very clear, then essentially that case may be correct. It may be correct to go to tribunal, but it should be the matter of discussion to enable both parties to see the best way forward.
Okay, thanks. I've had a number of comments in throughout, Fiona. I mean, I think it may be helpful if you could address the difference of when you use ADR for disputes rather than complaining about HMRC.
Okay. Yeah. We obviously, in dispute resolution, we're looking at a dispute in the tax issue. So it's a tax dispute. What if there is a compliance intervention and there is a question over, let's say, a customer's tax return? We're looking at the tax dispute. A complaint, in my head, is an expression of dissatisfaction at how HMRC has handled that compliance intervention. So that would go to complaints. An obvious one I appreciate, and my colleague in complaints will not love me saying this, of course, is delay. That sort of thing would go to complaints, because we in dispute resolution can't do anything about that. All we can do is deal with the actual tax dispute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Do ADR staff award costs as per HMRC rules that compensation will be paid for waste of an agent's professional time?
We don't do that with an ADR, so we don't. That's if there's the cost issues are really within the hands of SOLs.
Okay, thank you. What are the areas for dispute that are referred to ADR? Is it only for tax liability / demand disputes?
Oh.
No, I think we've had a few questions and comments on this, Fiona. So, for example, what heads of taxes can go to ADR? So, corporation tax, income tax, VAT, furlough payments.
There are we are doing C's, CRS and C's payments. So we are. If it is under appeal, we don't look at the initial decision, but we can look at it if it's under appeal. So we can, if it's in the normal compliance process for CRS or C's, we will look at that. So if there's a query about that, whether there's suitability, give me a shout and we can discuss with whoever might be making the application as to whether I can't say whether it be accepted or not, but whether it's worth making an application. But we do look at those when they're under appeal and they're part of the normal compliance process. Basically, all the heads of tax. I'm trying to think. CT, IT. I've done IHT, CGT. Sorry, inheritance tax, capital gains tax. That there are various now. There are some areas, obviously, of customs and excise that we cannot look at. There are some areas that we can. It just depends a little bit on what the actual issue is. We don't do civil evasion penalties and things like that, but there are other areas that we can maybe help with. So there is on our website an out of scope list. Again, what I'll try and do, Kevin, but once I send you these slightly amended slides, I'll actually send you a link to the website for all your listeners here, so that might be easier. And that will give you an idea of the out of scope list. And basically, if it's not on that, hopefully it's within scope, if that makes sense. So, but things like criminal cases can't come in because we can't allow somebody to incriminate themselves, obviously. So we can't endanger a criminal prosecution. But most heads of tax are in there, she says. But I'm sure somebody will come up with one that isn't in a minute.
What about penalty disputes?
On the surface of it, I'm going to say that there is no reason not to apply, and it'll be given its proper consideration if you apply.
Okay, thanks. Philip comments, I'm aware of situations where the HMRC manual differs to tax law. In such situations, would a mediator simply accept HMRC's manual?
It'll be up to the HMRC party to make the decision along with the customer party. So the mediator doesn't actually make a decision, and I'm not trying to be facetious when I put it like that. So they will have to rely on the HMRC party's view of the law, and that will most likely be the manual, but they'll have to rely on HMRC's interpretation and view of the law.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned you discussed the difference between when you complain and when you use ADR.
Yeah.
Somebody's come back and said, if the complaint staff haven't done a good job, can you take that to ADR?
That normally, as far as I know, and again, I do stand to be corrected here, as far as I know, if there is a problem with that, again, that would come in under complaints, and you would escalate the complaint, possibly even as far as to the Ombudsman. But in the first instance, I would probably be going to the complaints team if you weren't happy with what was happening there. But if there's a particular difficulty, again, if you give somebody a ring, I'm sure we will try and direct you in the right direction.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, can you also, does international tax disputes referred to ADR or only domestic tax disputes?
They can be. Yep, there is, subject to any of the other exclusions, there is no particular reason why they can't come into ADR.
Okay. Now, I don't know whether you're able to do this, but can you give us an outline of the weirdest case you've ever had to mediate on?
Oh gosh. Weirdest case I've ever had to mediate on. Mm-hmm. Oh, now my mind's gone blank on all those mad cases I've had.
Okay, not to worry, let's not torture you over it.
No, I'm trying to think. I can keep thinking. I'm thinking of one of the biggest I had. I had 15 people in a room at one stage, 7 in one party and 8 in the other party. We split into lots of little groups because there were so many different heads of tax under discussion. That was quite a big, complex case, so it was. I can't. I'm sorry, Kevin. I just can't think of one off the top of my head.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Well, that brings today's webinar to a conclusion. Can I firstly say thank you very much to Fiona for giving up her time and writing the presentation for us. So thank you, Fiona.
Pleasure.
Thank you all for listening in today. We'll be having another one of our webinars next month on something that's very topical at the moment, R&D disputes and inquiries. So hopefully many of you will be able to join us for that. Meanwhile, thank you again for listening. I'll let Fiona have the last word and say goodbye.
I can't really top that. I'm just going to thank you all very, very much for listening. And as I said, I should have had that up. If anybody needs to get in touch with me, it will be on the bottom of the slide, so it will. And please do keep referring to us if there's any cases, any queries. We do quite a wide range of cases. We're always happy to listen, and we're always happy to try and help if we possibly can. But thank you for your time. And Kevin, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye.